Okay, this is one, go.
Hi, I'm Linda Stock, and I'm a master gardener from the Benton-Franklin County district, and in Washington State. And I want to talk to you today about growing vegetables. And one of the first things that's really important about growing vegetables successfully is planning out your garden and knowing when to grow things and what seasons. So right now we're in what we call the cool season, and it's important to make sure you get your ground prepped right and ready for your seeds. So over here in this bed, you can see some things back here, and I'll talk to you about that later. That's the celery, and in front here you can see I've laid a package of beets. Beets are a cool weather kind of plant, and they grow pretty rapidly. So I've amended my soil. It's really important to go ahead and put in about 2 inches worth of fresh compost in and mix it in the soil. And you can do that throughout the garden, and that will add some water retention and also drainage, and it'll allow that soil to, the water to move through that soil, and the roots and the new seedlings to come up through. They won't have to fight through the hardened soil. So it's an important thing to do annually, and you can see this box is not completely full of soil because I just started it last year. And it'll continue to get fuller and fuller as I use it, as well as the plants will use those nutrients. So we're going to take a stroll through the garden. I've laid out some seeds. These are all cool weather plants that I'm going to plant, and I wanted to show you and talk to you about how they're laid out and how I'm going to use my garden. You ready? So if we walk down here, you can see I've got some extra composted here. It's got the manure blend already in it, and I haven't added it to the soil yet. And you can see there's some onions in here that are growing, and these are green onions, and those can be planted pretty much all year long. But they're great for an early season and then a late season. And you can see the ones at the far end, those are last year's onions that I've wintered over, and they're doing just fine. And then up at the front end is some seeds that I put in at the fall, and they're growing nicely. So I've got green onions I can harvest. In the center is where I'm going to put my tomatoes later. But you can utilize that space because tomatoes grow tall and put things that are shorter underneath them. Carrots are a great companion to your tomatoes, and so are the onions. They grow very well. And carrots also will winter over really well. You can see some carrot tops are in here. The tops don't really work too well. You don't really have to worry too much about how tightly you plant them because you're going to thin them and use them as they grow, and leave the smaller ones in, and they'll go ahead and grow larger, and you'll have carrots throughout the winter that are nice and healthy. For spring, you don't have to wait. They'll winter over for you, and you can go ahead and use those. And they're nice and fun. My companions here love carrots, so they're hanging out here. So I'm going to give my kids some carrots. So as we walk around the garden, you can see that I've got some really good fencing, and I've got some support structures here, and we'll talk about those and how I utilize those and how important they are to be a successful vegetable gardener in our varied climate. One of the things you'll see is I've utilized some good fencing material. Anytime you can move anything vertically and grow anything vertically, it increases your ability to grow and produce food. And peas are a great thing to plant along an edge because they will grow right up and support here. And then it allows me some room here, and I've laid down here some bush beans. These are later plant. They'll grow in the summertime. They need warmer temperatures, and they'll grow real nicely in front. They'll grow about this tall, And they'll be ready and producing right about the time my peas are done, and I won't have to worry about them competing for space. So let's talk about these hoop covers. I want to show you some things. We have a variety of climates, and we have some things that we need to take care of and deal with. We have different kinds of pests, and we have plants that don't like too much sun, but we get some really hot days. So a real easy way to create a shade and help your plants like your tomatoes, your cabbages, your broccoli, cauliflower, and even some of those lettuces, to reduce the temperature in your garden space, you can use shade cloth. And I'm lazy, so I like to do things just the quick and easiest way. And honestly, the quick and easiest way is to take some rebar, pound it into the ground, take your PVC and slide it right down over the top of it. This bed is 4 feet wide, and this is a 10-foot hoop of PVC. Works really well. And I use clamps. I don't worry about zip ties and all those kinds of things because they tend to break down. I've tried that. But these clamps work really easy. They're not too expensive. And when it's a day that you want to get to your harvest, you can clip it out really easy and get it out of the way. And then you can put it right back in place, and it's ready to go. If you have something in your area that you might need different kinds of coverings, it's easy to change them out. So I'm going to walk over here and I'm going to show you how it works with a winter covering that I actually use to grow the celery over the winter. Celery is a plant that that normally planted in the summertime. It grows really well, and oftentimes it's just dug out and we throw the base away. 3, 2, 1.
Yep, we are on.
So a simple way to cover it is, again, using the PVC. And you can see these are just braced in because these boxes have a lip on them, and so arched over. And these larger clamps work really well because there's a lip around here. So go ahead and just clamp on your plastic and provide an insulator barrier for your plants to grow. I did that with the celery here, and you can see how nice it looks. And one of the tricks that I also did is, rather than taking it out of the ground, there's a little trick that's called garbage gardening. And some people have already seen that kind of video where you take your grocery store celery base and you put it in water and it will grow. So I tried the experiment of just hacking it off last year when I harvested all of my celery, and I left it in the ground with the plastic cover over the top of it. And you can see that it's done really well, and it's produced the celery. It grows through the winter, it stays kind of short, but in the end I've got a second harvest of celery that I want you to encourage you to kind of think about those kinds of things when you're planting, how you can continue to have a harvest and reduce the amount of work and renew your produce. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
So another cover that's really important is a protective cover for insect barriers. We have a lot of plants that both are susceptible to some things called leaf miners and even cabbage moths and those things. So I wanted to show you just really quick how easy it is to construct a support frame for some lighter weight fabrics that you can take off as your plants grow or leave on and as you need to. So what I've got here is some 1 foot long, just the 3/8 inch rebar. It doesn't have to be really thick. I've got some rebar, and I've got some 1/2 inch poly pipe. You can see it's already curved, which is super easy to deal with, and my Reemay. The Reemay is a fabric with a light row cover, and it'll last for a really long time. Of course, in order to be able to do anything, you need the right tools. So tubing cutter for my tubing, and just a mallet to drive my rebar in, and some scissors, and then some clamps. And my clamps, I've got 3 different varieties here I wanted to show you. These are a little bit heavier duty, the ones that I've got. You know, they take a pretty strong hand on the spring, but they hold really well because they've got the rubber on the ends, so they tend to hold onto your plastic really well, or any of your fabrics. This is a smaller clamp, and you kind of see that these have got a little bit of a lever action on the end to help grab. And then you've got a little bit of a heavier duty clamp here, also with a lever action here too. So you can get a variety of them. I have a variety of them hanging around all over the place. I like to use structures to kind of store them, and whenever I need one, I can just grab one. So what I'm going to do is just going to show you how to go about this. I'm going to start, put the one piece of rebar in here. I'm going to show you just how easy it is. This is an 8-foot long bed. Nobody has to be too precise. I'm going to go right out about here. It's about the middle. And I'm just going to drive that down in. And I'm going to go ahead and take it down in far enough that I can get that tubing over the top of it, but it's going to hold that pretty rigid. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll stop the camera here. I'm going to go ahead and go around, and we'll be back at you in a second.
Okay.
So I've got my rebar pounded in all the way around, and I just put 4 on each side, and I've lined them up easily. Now I'm ready to go ahead and add my PVC tubing, or my poly pipe. And it's so simple. Just go ahead and stick a piece on here. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a math wizard. You don't have to do some super calculations. I'm all for hands-on, figure it out, find out what works, and then cut it off and move on. So that's about where I want my hoop, because my spinach is going to grow this high, and so is my cilantro. And the cilantro likes cooler weather, and you can see how this was seeded last winter when my plants went to seed. I did that on purpose and scattered them, and they've grown on their own because they're a cool season plant. And then I put some spinach seeds in here. And this is the one that I'm mostly concerned about, and why I'm going to put the remate, because the leaf miners get in there. But for me, it's just as simple as figuring out, okay, I want this to come to about down to here. Take my tubing cutter and whack off a piece, and then see if I like it. And I like it. So guess what? That's my measurement. So what I'm going to do is going to go ahead and finish cutting the rest using this piece here as my measurement. Really easy to just lay it on and get my next cut and continue laying them on here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back and I'll show you the fabric. So this is Remay, and this is a really lightweight fabric that all your water and your sunlight is going to go ahead and go through this, even though I've got a drip irrigation system in here. And I wanted to talk with you about a couple of basics here. You notice that this is pressure treated lumber, and I wanted to dispel an old truth, and that is that we used to not be able to use pressure treated lumber because of the chemicals. But pressure treated lumber has been treated now with a copper, and so it is now safe for your gardens. And in fact, because it's copper, it also will tend to dissuade slugs, because slugs don't like copper. So pressure treated wood is just great to put into the garden. Some of the other beds are cedar also. And then you'll notice my drip tubing through here. Now I do something different. These are small mini misters, and they spray in a little pattern, you know, of about 3 feet. And I like this kind of method rather than trying to do just individual drippers at the spots, because then I can plant anywhere I want to. But you can do whatever you want. I like this method. It allows me to plant more plants, and I don't have to be too precise. And these misters spray low, so the plants will go ahead and get plenty of water. So here's our Remay, And the easiest way to go ahead and figure out how much you need is just to keep your scissors, set them off over on the back of the burner, and take your clamp and clamp it on. Now, we live in a really windy climate, so you can make a decision whether you want to clamp your relay to your tubing, or if you want to clamp it to your wood. But it's really important because we want to keep the bugs out of here. We want to make sure that this completely covers the end here. And then we're going to go ahead and come over to this side and do the same thing. That's going to give me a pretty good indication.
Go ahead.
Ready? So you can see we left off before where I was going to cut this, and basically, pretty simply, you can see how well these hold up. They're very sturdy, and just simply clamp it to the one side, bring it over, clamp it to the other side, and then cut it down off. And then you want to roll your edges together in the center, and it works out real well. I just clamp it to the drip tubing, and now I've got some protection here to keep the pests away from my spinach when it grows, and keep it cooler because I've got the cilantro, and cilantro likes to bolt. So, real simple, easy way to do. You can get it done in 5-10 minutes, and easy to take off when you're done with it or move. You don't have to have a box. You can go ahead and create these hoops just like this in a flat area if you have something like your cabbages and everything where I'm going to plant mine next year or this year. I'm not going to be putting them in a box, but I'll be able to create a hoop structure over them to keep the cabbage moths off of them. So here we are back here. We've got our covering here, and I wanted to talk to you about that, about your planning on your planting, your gardening. And if you look under here, the reason this is here is it creates shade and it creates a cooler temperature for things that like it cooler. And the cooler things that grow right now that you can plant in the ground, or I'm going to show you how you can use some household items and plant some things and get them started really easy without going to a lot of expense. But in planting my garden, I've planted broccoli seeds in the center, and when they grow and sprout, I'll be able to move them and separate them, and I'll plant them right along these edges on the inside line here. And this space, I've planted lettuces. And the reason I'm doing that is twofold. Lettuces are also a cool season crop, and they like the shade. So the broccoli also grows tall and likes shade and provides shade because of the leaves. So I'm using Mother Nature and at those tools that she gives me to extend my growing season. You want to plant lettuce about every couple of weeks because it's going to grow quickly. It's only like a 45-day crop. So you can plant your lettuce every few weeks and get a new, keep it going. And you don't have to plant it in a row. You can plant it, scatter it, and it's really pretty easy to plant it because it's not deep. You just want to rake through the soil pretty loosely, get it loosened up, scatter your seeds, and then just kind of brush the soil over the top of it in order to get it covered lightly, and then just lightly pack it down, just tap it. And that is enough to set your seeds so that you can get your lettuce to grow. When it comes in, you can move the lettuce and thin it if you've got the head lettuce or the leaf lettuce, and you can enjoy that baby lettuce all through the season while you're thinning it to allow your big heads to grow. And then it's so easy to put right back. You just clamp it over. And in our winds, this holds up really well. So I wanted to show you that because it's important. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to show you a couple of things.
Yeah.
You might notice I've got a lot of plants that have started here. And these are not what everybody likes to start their plants in. Everybody thinks you've got to run to the nursery store, you know, or the hardware store, and you've got to buy the separated little containers and the bottom tray and the dome and all those things. And just one set can usually set you back at about $9. So what I like to do, which is a whole lot simpler and a lot more efficient, and besides that, it's kind of fun. This is a muffin container from Costco. You know, you can get the same type of container in your lettuces, you know, in the grocery store, cookies, any kind of baked goods. A lot of times they'll come in these hard plastic, you know, containers. And this creates a great terrarium for your plants to grow. You can see that I've got them in here, and I've gone ahead and put the different kinds of tomatoes that I've got growing. And it's so easy to just put them in, get them going. You want to just make sure that you've got good soil, dampen it, set your seeds according to the back of the package, which these are about 1/4 of an inch they ask you to set them in. And again, lightly cover them over, and then wet it, and then close the lid. When you close the lid after it's nice and wet, that keeps that moisture in, and you won't have to add water for about another week. And then you can go ahead and check to see if but it's going to get all nice and misty. Put it in a nice sunny window on a table next to a nice sunny window in a warm environment, because these kinds of plants, they're the warm season ones, and they're usually the kind of things that you buy at the store already planted, so you can get a head start. So you can do this at home, you can do this now, and you can just write it on top of the lid what kind of a plant that you've got. So I've got beefsteak tomatoes here. Here's some San Marzano tomatoes here. This is a variety, and I just wanted to show you, just because you can plant different kinds of things, and just mark your lid and write down on it what kind it is and put it in it, and you're fine. So these were put in my greenhouse, and they were put on a heat mat so that the temperature of the soil remains at about 70 degrees, and that's about the best time to germinate. Some of your other cooler things, like your broccoli and your cabbages and your cauliflower, they didn't need a heat mat because they're a cooler kind of a germinator. Now I put some in the ground, and I've done it both ways. I like to experiment. So I've sown my seeds directly into the ground, and I've also grown them this way in order to get plants to move into it. And you can see the broccoli is up. You can see I've got 2 different colors of cabbages in here, the purple cabbage and the green cabbage. They're doing just fine. And then the cauliflower. And those didn't need any special heat. But I wanted to show you just how simple it is to do. This is okra, and it needs to be, it's a warm season plant. So I need to get it started if I'm going to have it ready to put in the garden when it goes in. And it's key to look at the back of your packages. The back of your packages generally have a label on the back with a little map of the United States. And it'll tell you what zones you're in and when it is a good time to plant your seeds. And they always will give you. We were talking about just growing in bulk in one tray. Grow all your plants in one, so that you don't have to take up so much space, and then you can separate them later. So I have to get my okra started. If I don't, I'm not going to have any, and it takes a little while. Normally it's a warm season plant, and if I wanted to put this in the garden, I would have to wait until probably end of May to July. It's going to take a longer time. So these are pretty large seeds, and they take a 1-inch depth. And I could, if I wanted to follow all the directions, I would need a huge space to grow them. But what I can do is I can take my little tool here, and I can make a hole in here and space them out and put a whole bunch in here all at one time. Now, that's 15 plants. I'm not going to need 15 plants. I'm not worried if they don't all come up. There's a good chance that most of them will, and it's about Well, I think I need a total of 8. So almost twice as many as what I'm actually going to need. So if I get 50% germination, I'm happy. But as a general rule, this is a really good way to get things to germinate. It's moderately damp. It's not too wet because I'm going to water it in. But your soil usually needs to be a little damp. It's awfully hard to work with when it's completely dry. It won't absorb the water very well. So I've put it in here, and I've got it in here just pretty deep. And I've poked a hole in here, spaced it out, about every 2 inches. I've managed to get 15 holes in here. So this creates a quick and efficient way for me to grow my plants in a small space, and then I can move them into some larger areas after they've germinated. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of in each hole because I can separate them, and that just gives me an opportunity, to have a better success rate. I might get 30 plants, I might get 15, I might get a dozen. But I'll go ahead and do it this way, just because it's quick and efficient, it doesn't take a lot of space, and easy to control. Now, these take some warmth, so I'm going to take this after I get it watered, and I'm going to make sure that I put it in a warm, sunny spot that's going to warm the soil up. And I'm also not going to pack this down a lot. I'm just going to use my little tool and just make sure that seed gets covered over. I don't want to really pack it down in there hard. I want to make sure that this little seedling has an opportunity to come up with as little problem as possible. Now what I'm going to do is water this and then close it up and snap it up. And what will happen is the heat will build up in this, and the water will be maintained in here, and this will be its own little terrarium. And that holds the moisture in and the heat. And again, like I said earlier, you really only need to water it about once a week. And just check it. And you'll be able to see that come up. And you can write that stuff on here. But the big question for folks usually ask is that, okay, now they've got all these seeds in one spot, what am I going to do with them? How am I going to get them out of here, and how am I going to separate them? Well, take a tool like this, or you can go get, this is actually an orange peeler. I stole it out of the kitchen. My husband is not too happy about it, but I like it. It works real well. But you can go get some Chinese food, pick up some chopsticks. They work out really well. You can take and measure them off if you really want to keep track of your depth and you're still learning until you get a good eye for it. You can measure them off at 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, and 1 inch depths, and you can use that to set your depth for your holes. But I take this little tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my potting soil, and ideally this should be wet, but I've not got it wet. I'm going to just kind of show you, then I'll have to wet it down. But what I would want to do is have my pot already filled with soil, and then I just want to go in very carefully and pick up this soil right in here and grab this plant. This plant is ready to go into some new soil. And it's okay to see, you can see the roots there, it's all got the fine ones. And then you take the same tool, poke a nice hole in, and feed your roots down into the soil. And with tomato plants, you go ahead and cover it, put it down as far down as you can get it, and then put the soil up as high as you can get it. That's just to see how easy it is to do a whole tray in one confined space and separate them out when they get a little larger. After they've gotten rid of their baby leaves, they've gone past those, and they've got their first mature leaves like these. These are perfect to dibble out. So I'll be doing that, over the next day or so. I wanted to just kind of give you a glimpse of how easy that is to do. You can start your summer plants indoors and get your good start. Tomatoes, peppers, squashes, cucumbers, those kinds of things really do well, this kind of method. And you can move them out into a bigger container when you need it. So that's as much as I can help you out with today. I hope you've learned a lot, and happy gardening.